Hi everyone, hope you're all well on this Sunday. I was a bit unsure what to talk about this time. I kind of thought about it and didn't really know where to go. Obviously there's so many different things that I can talk about, but it was trying to find that one thing that kind of people wanted to maybe know about. But I've decided that I'm going to talk about, even though I don't work now because of how poorly I am, I want to talk about how it's kind of been throughout the years, because I've always worked since the age of 14. Started working at Wimpy when I was 14, just as a waitress. And I've always been someone that's throughout the years always gone to work, and then to now not be able to work. It was one of those things that I found quite hard to kind of digest, really. But I'd say that even though I was poorly, at the age of 16, 17, I went and worked at Primark, and I remember feeling poorly then. Obviously I've always, since the age of around about 14, I have been ill, but as things have gone on, things have got progressively worse. But I remember I'd try not to call in sick, but I had to have quite a lot of time off when I worked at Primark. And even though I was the one that handed my notice in, because I actually was pregnant, and that's why I handed my notice in, the person that I handed my notice in to, they were like, well, you have had a lot of time off anyway, so it's probably best. They weren't family orientated whatsoever. They had no understanding, I understand they need people to come to work, but as a whole, I didn't feel like they were kind of interested in me. You was just a person. You was just somebody that would fill that gap for them. You wasn't somebody that, that they would really care about. And obviously I went on to have Oscar, and I worked at a little shop called Norfolk Tea Rooms. And I'd be poorly there, but Tammy, who is now she's like my second mum, she was so understanding. So if I felt poorly, I'd go in, but I could do jobs that wouldn't really be that hard on my body, which was a lot easier. Or if I woke up poorly, she'd say, I'd message her and she'd say, come in an hour later, or I could go home early, things like that. And that was really, really helpful. When you've got this, you do need people to really understand what's going on, because otherwise it's just so tough. Because you don't just need a family network and friends, you need workplaces to understand and be compassionate. And I do think that's really hard to find, especially when you work for a big corporation and a big brand and a big name. They don't as much, because you can be replaced in a minute. You can be gone and give it a couple of days and someone's filled your space, and that's it. You are just a number to so many different places, and I hate that so much. But my biggest kind of memories of being at work was worked at Lidl. So I became a shift manager when I was working at Lidl. So obviously I'd run shifts, and I would do between 11 and 12 hour shifts every time. So I used to work probably it was 40 to 50 hours that I would do. It would be quite a lot, because that's just kind of the hours that you do. But I used to love working there. I really did. I used to love being busy all the time. Working from a young age all the time, it was something that I would do. But after being there for about, I'd probably say 3-4 months is when I started to get worse. Whether it was because it's Lidl, working at Lidl is really manual job. You're constantly working stock, putting stock out, especially if you're working in the mornings. Throughout the day, you're even putting stock out, constantly bending down. And I was starting to struggle to get down to the floor. And once I'd got down, it would hurt to get back up. And once I'd stop to go for lunch, I'd be in pain, or I'd have to go and sit down in the canteen just to give myself a few minutes. You know, I was quite lucky because I was a shift manager. I was able to give myself that time I would take a couple of minutes out of my lunch to go and sit down and just give myself a 5-minute break. But it did get to the point where it was so hard. I am somebody that I won't call in sick. There was only a few times that I actually called in sick. It's just something that isn't me. I'd always want to be there. Even if I was like near enough feeling like I was dying, I'd guarantee I'd turn up to my shift because I didn't want to let people down. I didn't have to want someone to cover my shift. You know, that's my shift. That is my job. That's what I'm meant to be doing. So I would always turn up and I'd always give my best no matter what. You know, I was going to the hospital, and this is throughout this time of working at Lidl was when I was being told it was all in my head. It was really, really hard because how do you, when you're feeling so poorly and you're being told it's all in your head, how do you explain that to an employer? How do you explain how you're feeling when people could then not believe you if you're putting it on? You know, some days I'd feel so poorly that I'd say, right, I'm going to be the main till person today. And I'd go and do a 12-hour shift sitting on a till. Because even though sitting down didn't help, it also did because I wasn't constantly lifting things. And the reason why I put myself on a till is because everybody else would be in a better position and be able to get on with the things that they need to do if I was out of the way, because I wouldn't be an inconvenience. So the easiest thing for me to do was to go and sit on a till and work on a till. Even though I was a shift manager, I'd just put myself forward because I'd feel bad. Like the other person who would have been on the till could now be on the shop floor and work in stock and get people through the day. And I'd just go and sit on a till for 12 hours. And because this is when my symptoms of frequency and urgency started to come in. And I actually didn't ever imagine there was anything wrong with my bladder until I got diagnosed with interstitial cystitis. So I knew there was something wrong, but to me it was more, I really thought it was gynae. Obviously it wasn't, but that's really what I thought it was going to be, and that's what the outcome was going to be. But I remember everybody kind of knew me as the person that would constantly be going to the toilet. I'd be on the till and I'd have to call someone over to quickly jump on the till so I could run to the toilet and come back. I just used to spend so much time there because I was so desperate for a wee. And if I didn't go, like, there was one night I was working a shift and I was actually had tears streaming down my face because I was waiting for someone to come and take over from me on the till. And I was in so much pain and needed a wee that bad that I was scanning items with tears rolling down my face because I was in so much pain. That's kind of to the extreme that it would be because I needed a wee so bad, or my bladder needed to relieve my urine so bad that the pain would then come on. And once that pain's there, you're not getting rid of it. It could last up to from a couple of hours all the way to a couple of days. It's really, really, really tough. So yeah, I would do that sometimes, but other times I'd come in, I would work stuff, and I would come in, I'd be looking so rough some days, no makeup, hair shoved up, I'd have no sleep. Some days I'd go into work, I've only had a couple of hours sleep, and you know, that was one thing, like when I was really, really poorly, you could tell, like you only had to look at me and be like, you're looking rough. Like, that's honestly how it was. I just used to look so rough. Because I wouldn't get any sleep. You know, if I've done a 12-hour shift before and I'm working loads of stock, say I've had to work fruit and veg, because there were some days that there wasn't anybody to work fruit and veg. So some days you'd get like 6 or 7 pallets of fruit and veg and you've got to work them in 2 hours. So I'm lifting off like cardboard boxes of potatoes and carrots and putting them on and picking them up, and that was really tough, you know, but at the end of the day that was my job and that's what I had to do. And as someone that was the person in charge of that shift, I had to put myself forward to do it. So I would then go home after having such a grueling shift, and then I'd be in so much pain for the rest of the night that I wouldn't sleep. So I'd be awake all night, and then I'd have to be back at work for 6 o'clock, 5 or 6 o'clock. So by the time it's got to like 3, 4 o'clock, and my body is kind of starting to really need to sleep, even though it's not able to, I was then having to get up again. So I was only really having a couple of hours sleep, and then I'd go back into work absolutely exhausted. And it was tough, you know. I know that there were certain people who didn't believe me and thought I was putting it on. You start to get this, there's this same face that everybody pulls when they don't believe you. And you start to recognise it, and you just know. And it's so tough because I didn't have a diagnosis. So I couldn't go, well, I am poorly, I've got this. It was, well, I do feel really rough. And although so many people wanted me to get better, and they'd always say, I wish you could find out what was wrong and why you do feel like you're in so much pain. I also believe there also was people, although they wanted that for me, they also didn't believe that it was as bad as I was making out. And no one will truly understand, like, when you are in so much pain, you know, I would get up and I would go to work and I'd push through, because that is who I am. Like, I am a person who will get up and I will get on with what I've got to do. I'm not going to call in sick, and I'm not going to let anybody down. So I would be there, and I'd turn up to my shift and I'd make sure I was there. Even if that meant, you know, not working as fast as I usually do, or being, you know, I had to push through. But I'm not someone that gives up, and like I said, like, letting people down is like one of my worst fears. I don't want to let anybody down. But I would make sure I'd turn up, so then people would think, well, she can't be that poorly because she's here. So I was kind of shooting myself in the foot, because I was turning up to work and doing my job in so much pain that people then wouldn't believe that I was in as much pain as I was saying, because obviously I was turning up to work and I was physically able to be there. I wasn't physically able to be there, but I was making sure I was going to be there, you know, and I would make sure that there were some days I'd just go around, I'd just put tickets up, you know, but I had to be there. I weren't going to let anybody down. And some people would say, you know, your health is more important than any job. It's 100% correct. It really, really is. Your health is so much more important than your job. But I couldn't let people down. I couldn't, even though little, like I said, you know, they can replace you in a heartbeat. You're gone, and within a day or two, they've got somebody there. You're only a figure to them. I wasn't Taylor to them. I was a person who was just running a shift. But if I called in sick, I was letting those other people down, who would then have to fill my shift in, and that wasn't fair for them to have to do an extra shift, especially when you're working 40, 50 hours a week, and you're then having to cover someone else's shift. Like, that's just not fair. So there wasn't, like I said, many times that I called in sick at all, and there were days that I would go in, I'd go sit on the till, or I'd go do tickets. I was quite lucky because I got on with the store manager really well, and he understood what was going on, and I explained everything, and he really, really knew what, although I didn't have any diagnosis, he did understand. And so I was lucky in the sense that if I thought anyone was judging me, I knew full well that the store manager was there for me. So I was really, really lucky in that sense, that it didn't matter what anybody else thought, because the person that ultimately had my job in his hands 100% believed me. And so because of that, he would give me other jobs that were easier, to make my work and life easier. Or if I had a hospital appointment, he'd move things around for me to be able to fit all of that stuff in. So in that aspect, things were really, really good. But as time kind of went on, things started to get worse, and I was feeling worse and just feeling so poorly. I would say that being at Lidl was one of the worst times that I've ever felt. And as much as there was support there wasn't. Because Lidl's so big. So if you're going to go, they're just going to replace you. And looking back now, I wish that I had called in sick more times than I did. Because those people didn't have my health interests at heart at all. And once I'd left, I realised that. Once I'd left that place, I realised that those people didn't really care at all, because, oh, well, to be fair, I haven't heard from them. You know, you leave and you be so poorly and they say like, oh, I hope you get things sorted, and you find out what's wrong, and then you leave and you don't hear nothing. And I do wish I called in sick more, and it really is, your health is so much more important. And I remember once I left to go and be a deputy store manager at B&M. And although I knew I was ill, I declared, I am ill, I get a lot of pain, but I'm always at work, I will be there. So I went for the deputy store manager job with all interest of like moving higher. And then obviously while I was at B&M, I'd only been there probably about, I think it was 3-4 months I'd kind of been there. And I then had my operation, and then that's from where kind of things then went downhill, and I've not been able to work. But working at B&M, being a deputy store manager, if there was days that the jobs that I chose were very, very manual, because that's what I liked. I liked to be on the shop floor, interacting with the customers, but also doing my own thing and being able to do what I wanted to do. But because of that then meant that the job was really physical, which also didn't help me. But I can't sit down for long periods. I can't. Having interstitial cystitis isn't just a bladder condition. And obviously last week I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia. So that's obviously something else that I had and didn't realise that that's what it was. But yeah, interstitial cystitis isn't just a bladder condition, it affects everything. So I couldn't work stock. This is coming right to the end of towards my operation and how things were really bad. So I can't work stock because the bending up and down, it hurts, because you have to bend down to pick stuff up, shelves, and put on. I wasn't able to move anything heavy because that would then trigger something and make me ill. I couldn't sit down for long periods of time, because if I sat down for too long, that brings pain on too. So I can't stand up for too long. I can't sit down for too long. I can't lay down for too long. Like, I can't even lay in the same position in bed for too long. I have to lay down, then sit up, get up, go for a walk, just to try and... I can't stay in the same position for a period of time, because it brings the pain on. So, deputy store manager, I'd have to do stuff in the office, but I couldn't sit down for too long, so I'd have to get up and go work some stock, but then I couldn't work the stock for too long, and then I'd go on the till, but I couldn't stand there for too long. And if I sat down, I'd then get up and down, that then causes problems. There's always, as soon as you think of something to overcome the problem, the thing that you've used to overcome the problem then becomes another problem. And you would think, and obviously being on the till, I'd constantly be needing to go to the toilet, going for a wee. So I'd be serving a customer and I'd just have to quickly run away. But you've got a queue of people. So I couldn't then work on the tills either. I needed to be on the shop floor to be able to, be able to freely go backwards and forwards to the toilet. But I was then not getting any sleep. And then when you don't sleep, it's hard to concentrate, because anyone knows that. Like, no matter whether you're poorly or not, if you don't get a good night's sleep, the next day you're not going to be in a position where you're going to be able to concentrate. So that then is another issue. So I was then really, really struggling to go to work with no sleep. And my sleep was getting worse and worse. And now I probably get between 2 and 3 hours sleep every night. I wake up constantly. Sometimes I'll look at my phone, and when I'll wake up and just look to see what the time is. And if I go to do that, sometimes that can be every 10 minutes. So I've looked at my phone, gone back to sleep, woke up. I've only been asleep 10 minutes. Go back to sleep, I'd wake up again, another 10 minutes. So my sleep is so broken, and obviously that does affects your concentration and your attitude. You then, if I don't get a lot of sleep, I will be really snappy, and you can't be snappy when you're working with customers. And you need to have patience with people, but when you have no sleep, that is hard. Like, it is so hard. And I am quite a patient person. Like, I would class myself as quite laid back, but when you've got no sleep, it's a whole different story. Like, that just is. And then I'd be in so much pain, and as the months went on, the stronger my medication got. So I'd have some really bad days, and luckily when I moved to B&M, it was a 5-minute walk, whereas when I went to Lidl, I had to drive half an hour. So because I was able to walk, I could then take stronger medication. Obviously, I'd declare if I'd taken it, but if I had to take oral morphine that day because the pain was so bad, the side effects of morphine are similar side effects to when you've had hardly any sleep, and obviously there can be worse. And in the end, it just became something where, what can I physically do? Like, what job can I do? Like, this isn't just working at B&M and thinking of, to be able to work at B&M, it's really versatile, and that was the perfect situation. I sat down with my store manager, and we spoke about all these different, how about we reduce your hours down, or you go and work on the tills, you just work stock. We tried to figure out a way around it, but everything that we came up with, there then became a disadvantage to it, and that just wouldn't work. And once I'd had my surgery, I'd gone back to work. I had a week off and then went back to work, and that week I just couldn't. My mental health was really bad, so I ended up having to go to the doctors and just, I'm so poorly, I can't cope. So then I went off sick for 2 weeks, and then since then I haven't been back. But it's thinking of, I sit there and think, right, an office job. I don't have to do any manual labour. I can just sit there and answer phones and sit on the computer. But I can't sit there for too long. But how am I going to complete my job if I'm up and down all the time, going to the toilet, or up and down trying to move about? And then obviously I got my catheter, and then that became an issue because it's really hard to do stuff with this, especially the indwelling urethral one, because it's sore. It's sore to walk around. If I try and do any type of housework, it's just sore. So I can't do any housework. It does overtake your life. It's not just a bladder condition. It's not, people go, oh, I've had a bout of cystitis before. It's not just cystitis. I wish it didn't have the word cystitis in it, because it's not cystitis. It's not cystitis. It's not just a UTI. Like, it is a proper autoimmune condition, and it really does affect every aspect of your life. And that's how much it's affected work. And I even worked at because I got a degree in photography, and when I left uni, I went and worked at Ede and Ravenscroft, which is a photo editing company who take school photos and graduate photographs. And I would go to there and sit down, and it was just sitting down and editing, photoshopping images basically. But I was constantly up and down to the toilet, and they were so understanding. They're absolutely brilliant. I would speak to the person in charge all the time, and got on really well. But it was just so difficult because I had these symptoms of a UTI, so I was then having to ring the doctors, who'd say, right, you need to be here in an hour and a half. Then I'd have to go and speak to them and be like, I'm really sorry, but can I leave again early? It just gets in the way of everything, and it's so frustrating. I can't remember when my life was normal. And even now, it's obviously so much different because I'm not able to work. And it's better for me not to be able to work, because obviously if I'm not getting any sleep, I can then try and catch up during the day when I was at school. I can stand up as I please, sit down as I please, you know, and really look after myself. I had an appointment with a psychiatrist, but she was more one that helps you overcome the mental side of living with a chronic illness or chronic pain. And I spoke to her and she was like, keep going to work is the worst thing you're doing. If you're poorly and you wake up ill, you should not go to work. If you wake up and, you know, you're in pain, you need to call in sick. And I'd say, well, I'd be calling in sick every day. Or, you know, 9 times out of 10. She was like, well, so be it. If you're ill, you need the time off. If you're poorly and then you force yourself to go to work for the day, you're just making everything worse. You're making your condition and your health worse. And she was like, and that's not what you should be doing. And that's the one time that I truly thought that I need to start looking after myself. Because if, you know, I know they've got the interest of everyone, really. And a physiotherapist, she said the same. She was like, when you're poorly, you shouldn't go to work. You need to call in sick. But when you're living with a chronic illness, how do you call in sick whenever you feel ill? I'm in pain every single day. Near enough 24/7, I am in pain. I've always got pain there. And so, yeah, kind of ended up having to have quite a few interviews with specialists and consultants. And obviously, in the end, they all come together and decided that the best option for me was to not go to work. And that was their decision. They was like, you can't go to work. And it's hard because I know there must be people who look at me and think, really? Like, why are you not working? And it's tough to know that I know there's going to be people judging. I've had the comments, I've had the inboxes myself. I've had people say to me, like, why? I've even had somebody who actually went to the sick people and said that I was fraudulently off sick. But little did that person know, I didn't put myself on sick. Like, I didn't rule myself to not be able to work right now. That was the government's choice, and it was the consultants and the specialists who come together to decide with the government that I could not work. But you're always going to have people who want to bring you down, always, and it's tough. You know, people's opinions do hurt, and especially people's opinions when they don't really know much about your life. And they do hurt, and when you're trying your best and you go into work, but you know that people think you're putting it on. I just wish that people would keep their opinions to themselves and their looks to themselves. And if you think it, just shove it to the back of your mind. Like, why do you need to voice it? Why do you need to type it to me? Why do you need to do all these things? Why do you need to look at me in a certain way? You know, I know I'm not the only person, but I mean, as an overall, like, there's other people out there who were in the same situation that I was in, and going to work really poorly is hard enough, and pushing yourself to be there, let alone having the looks of judgment at the same time. So it is really, really tough. But I'm going to wrap this up. I hope this one has helped people. Again, if you've got things that you want me to talk about, then please go for it and write to me and let me know what you want me to talk about next. But I just felt like work is something that everybody does, and a lot of people with chronic illnesses do it, and I did for a long time. So I just felt it was important to talk about that aspect of my life. So yeah, but I've got my operation Thursday. I'll still try and get my video done for Sunday. Maybe I'll talk about the operation and how I'm kind of getting over it. But I will do my best to still post an episode. But thanks everyone for like everything you comment and you know, being so kind. It really does mean a lot. So enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and hopefully see you next week.